So here's the thing. So I look at myself and I suffer horribly from that imposter syndrome of like, how heck did I get where I am? How am I doing what I do? How do I know the people that I know? And a lot of it is personality and trying to, grab the best from everyone and encourage everyone and try to keep my ego out of it. I know I don't succeed all the time. We all struggle with that. But there are people who may not be great band directors, but they attract great numbers of kids. And so what we have to do is we have to look at that as, okay, so you can get them in and get them started. Now let's figure out how to get the next step done of making them great musicians or making you a better teacher to make them better musicians. Look at where everyone is and try to expand on it.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the great fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I really appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you know one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Cathi Leibinger. Hi, Cathi.
Hi, how are you?
Cathi, can you introduce yourself for my listeners?
Sure. I am a middle school band director in Miami. I'm in my 30th year of teaching. And right now I'm serving as president of the Florida Bandmasters Association, which is a huge honor. So I've also been on staff at the American Band College. This would have been my 23rd year. And Western International Band Clinic, which is also part of that same fantastic organization.
And so what school do you teach at now?
I teach at Ransom Everglades. I'm at the middle school campus in Coconut Grove, Florida. It's a private prep school. It's a 6 through 12 school. We have a 6 through 8 campus for the middle school and then a 9 through 12 at the high school. But I just teach the middle school band.
Cathi, can you tell me a little bit about your early musical career, how you got your start, what instrument you play, and sort of the early years, I guess?
Okay. When did you know you wanted music as a profession or a life passion? I think it was in elementary school for me. I remember, I was a musician at church and all that kind of stuff. My family didn't really have instruments at home, but we sang in church. And when I was in first grade, I had this amazing music teacher who let me take an elementary counting song, which now is not politically correct, so I won't name the song. But it was 1 little, 2 little, 3 little,
right.
lined up. And so he let me kind of orchestrate and use my classmates with different percussion instruments to kind of create an arrangement of the song and a musical experience, if you will. And I just really, really had fun with that as, 7-year-old or something. And then I also remember in elementary school, we had our Christmas pageant, and one of the younger kids, I think it was in 2nd grade, got sick, and they had a crucial part to do. And so my mom and the music teacher and that grade teacher, like the 2nd grade teacher, came to me and said, can you cover this part? Because we really need it, blah, blah, blah. So I felt really important, and I felt like, yeah, I kind of enjoy this. So I really got an early start into being passionate about music. I started playing French horn in my middle school band. I wanted to play trumpet because my mom had 8-track tapes of Herb Alpert, which, those of you that are old enough to remember 8-track tapes, remember the clunk in the middle of a song. That was always awesome. And when I got to middle school, I told my middle school band director I wanted to play trumpet. And he said, did your family own a trumpet? And I said, no. And didn't think we were going to get one. And they said, well, what do you think about French horn? And of course I said, what is that? And the rest is history. So that's what I ended up playing. When I got to high school, I did get to play trumpet in the jazz band and the marching band and pit orchestra and stuff like that. But my first enemy and love, both sides of the coin, is the French horn, which I always tell students when I adjudicate is God's instrument, because we blow in one end and God knows what's going to come out the other side. And it's only funny because it's true.
Well played. So growing up, you mentioned your elementary school teacher. How about in middle school or high school band? Do you remember those teachers and what kind of impact they had on you?
Yeah, my middle school teacher, we had a great program and we really enjoyed him. It didn't hurt that he was kind of young and cute and we all had a crush on him. So we wanted to impress him, so that was helpful. I remember kind of one piece that we played two pieces that I remember distinctly from middle school band, opposite ends of the spectrum. There was an arrangement of the soundtrack from the old movie with Robin Williams, Popeye, which, going back and looking at the movie, I don't know that it was that good, but we loved the music and we played that soundtrack. It was one of the best things to play. And then also a Claude T. Smith piece called Thousand Hills Overture, which had an octave F jump on the French horn. And I just remember working my butt off to get that and feeling so glorious when I got it. So that kind of got me started into, being excited about the music and playing my instrument. And then my high school program, we had a really active program. And, everybody has their high school angst and stuff like that. But for me, being in the band always gave me people to be around and a performance to look forward to. There was always something to do, something to get you motivated to get to the next week and get through the next day and that stuff. So our band took a trip to Canada every other year on an exchange. So we'd go up and then the Canadian kids would come down the next year. We had an exchange with different schools. And so that was kind of interesting as well.
All right. So let's talk about your pedagogical training.
My undergraduate was at Millikin University in Central Illinois. And I absolutely loved that place. I still do. I still talk to some of my professors from there. They're not all still at Millikin. Some of them are spread around, but it was a small place where you really got to know people and you got to have a lot of opportunities. And you were able to explore different things. I had a real passion for technical theater when I was in high school, and I worked backstage in college. And I actually took a lot of theater classes, kind of working towards an undergrad or a minor in theater, but I just didn't have the time. The music ed curriculum is so full, but I took scene design, play analysis. I took an acting class, which my music ed teacher said, he felt like every teacher should take an acting class, because there's days you don't want to be in front of those kids and you have to pretend that you do. So little things like I was doing instrumental methods and everything was coming together, but then I realized I sang in choir as a kid, but in terms of proper pedagogical training, I'm not really sure I know what I'm doing. So I sang in the university choir for a year, and I took private studio lessons for a semester. Just because I said, if I ever am called upon to teach chorus, I need to know what I'm doing. And they said, okay, fine, take some lessons. And then, we all had to do our piano proficiency test and class piano if you weren't a piano player. And I, passed it by the skin of my teeth. That score reduction and transposition was going to kill me. But I realized at the end of that experience that I really just did not feel comfortable on keyboard enough to do accompaniments for solos at a young level. If I'm going to teach middle school band, I should be able to play some accompaniments with kids. And so for that, I took private lessons, but I didn't take them through the university for credit. I took them through the kids prep department. So we had the prep department at Millikin where parents would sign up for their kids to take lessons. I taught some horn lessons to some middle school kids when I was in college. And I talked to one of the piano professors and said, I want to take piano, but I don't want to have to do a jury. She goes, sign up for the prep department and pay cash. And I did. And so I took piano lessons for a little while to get better at that. So it was kind of that experience in undergrad where they allowed me to think outside of the box to get things done.
So did you grow up in Illinois?
No, I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, same place as Rachel Maxwell. Imagine that. And then I moved to Miami in 1989. And right out of college, and I've been teaching here ever since, and love Miami. Absolutely love it.
So you've been teaching in Miami ever since you graduated from college. What was that decision like to kind of pack up and move to Miami?
Well, I actually packed up and moved to Miami for a guy that we dated. We met at Millikin, and then we dated long distance for 2 years, and then he transferred to the University of Miami. So then we got married and I moved down. And then 9 years later, things happened, and I realized I don't want to go back to Illinois. I really like it here. So I stayed.
Sure, absolutely.
So there you go.
Absolutely. Awesome. So, okay. So can you tell me about your program at Ransom Everglades?
Sure. It's a private prep school that charges a lot of money. So let's just put it that way. The middle school has 450 students in it, and we get students we have about 150 kids per grade level in the middle school, and we get kids from, this year I think 43 different elementary schools. So they're coming from all over Miami. I have about 72 students in the program. I have a beginning, an intermediate, and an advanced level. So each class meets about 40 minutes a day. But next year we're going to move to some sort of rotating block schedule, which I'm still trying to wrap my head around how that's going to go. A little nervous about that.
Do you teach beginners there?
I do. And in Miami and most of Florida, band starts in sixth grade. There are some schools that do elementary, but they're few and far between. Yeah,
I know you said you had 3 bands. One of them was beginner. I just slow to make that connection.
Yeah.
So tell me about your beginners. Do you do that then in one heterogeneous class?
For the first year, I have them all together. Usually I have a woodwind class and a brass class. But the numbers have gone down because the school keeps adding. We added strings, which took some numbers. We've added dance, which took some numbers. Now we're adding technology and all that kind of stuff. So numbers are down a little bit. They're still healthy and we're doing okay. But normally I start about 40 beginners, and this year I have about 20. I have 21 beginners. So we're in one class and we're right along, and they're going to be fine. They're going to be okay. From beginning, they progress to intermediate, and from intermediate to advanced. And occasionally, I'll get kids new to the school that already play an instrument, and they'll go into intermediate. And then sometimes kids will be in beginning band. I'll jump them to advanced if they're really making progress.
So, Cathi, you have your 3 bands, and so we talked a little bit about your beginners, and you have 40 minutes a day with them 5 days a week. What sort of what does the program look as far as like your year goals for each level, and what kind of performances are you putting at the end of the year or during the year?
Well, I'm one of those that I stick with the method books for the first 2 years because I just feel like there's so many skills that are better learned in a unison setting. Like, for instance, when we're working on 6/8, if we do 6/8 out of a method book that has all the different configurations of 6/8 and then 6/8 in different keys and then different styles and things like that, and everybody's playing in unison, I think they get a better grasp of it. I have friends that say they try to teach 6/8 from teaching a piece in 6/8, but inevitably the low brass are playing dotted halves or maybe dotted quarters, and only the trumpets and flutes and clarinets are getting the melody. So I stick with a skill-based approach with my beginners and my intermediates out of the method book primarily, and then we do, concert arrangements. We do concert arrangements all year for fun. we don't necessarily perform them all the time. Like I don't put things in front of them because of a performance. It's just here's a skill that you learned. Now let's apply it to a concert piece. And then my advanced group is more performance based. Applying those 2 years of skills into the music. Our performance schedule is really heavy. We don't have we're not quite as active as a lot of my friends are. And part of that comes from, we have kids from 40 different elementary schools from all over Miami, and they're doing a lot of stuff outside of school time. They're doing, they have club sports and school sports and robotics and math team and all kinds of stuff. And so I can't do stuff after school. It has to be done during the class because it's hard to get them all there. So in the fall, my advanced band plays for our new student open house. So admission season opens up in October, and we have a big open house on a Saturday, and all the students who want to apply for our school come. And so we're kind of the, music as they walk by kind of thing. But we have to play for an hour in the morning because there's one open house from like 8 to noon and another one from 2 to 5. So my kids play from 8 to 9, and then they sit around campus and we watch, this year we watched the music band and did some music games and some theory games and stuff. And then they played again from 2 to 3. But we have to play like an hour's worth of pop music right away in October. Which is a little challenging, but they have a good time. And then we have a solo and ensemble in the fall in our district. And then I do small class recitals with the intermediate and beginning students. So that's the fall semester. And then the spring, we have students who are selected for like the district and state honor bands. And then we have our concert band MPA with my advanced group. And then we do a new student orientation for the kids who've been admitted to our school, which is very similar to the October event, but it's just one performance, not two. And then our big finale spring concert in May.
So do you require solo and ensemble and honor band audition?
I don't. And my students prepare solos and ensembles for class to play for each other and to play for recitals, but I don't require them to go to the district MPA event because a lot of times they might have conflicts. And I just feel like requiring them and putting them in that kind of quandary. Like, I have students that, have to go to a wedding. So you've required that they go, but now they can't. Now what do you do? So what I do instead is they all have to prepare a solo for class. We do a recital about 2 weeks before the MPA in class. And before the entry forms are due for the MPA, they're pretty well ready to go. And I'll say, hey, do you want to take this? Do you want to take this? And I'll encourage them, but I'm not big on requiring that outside of class.
So you talked about how you work out of the method book a little bit. I kind of want to dig into this a little bit. And because one of the things is my year this year has been back to being a band director after years away. And so from my perspective, I'm looking at, okay, so I've been back at this and it's all coming back in a rush, not so quickly in some cases, but mostly doing okay. The kids are progressing. But I'm curious about that next step. One of the things that I find to be most difficult as a beginning band teacher is getting the kids. It's okay to get the kids through the first 6 notes, but it's that next step, getting them into book 2 of the method book, getting them across the break, getting them to, a little more range in the brass instruments, these sorts of things.
I think, and that's a great question. One of the topics that comes up on the band director group is which method book to use. And there's all this debate and discussion and stuff like that. I use Essential Elements because I know that book like the back of my hand, and, I know people say, well, I'm really bored with this book. And I just kind of have the attitude of, well, the kids have never seen it before. So, but I know that there are certain exercises that I need to introduce outside of the method book to make sure that when we get to, for instance, going over the break on the clarinet, Once you get to that, which is like 119 in Essential Elements Book 1, I'll do exercises as soon as they're getting a good sound on their mouthpiece and barrel, and then we learn the first 5 notes and stuff. I'll have the kids start practicing rolling down all the way down to a low G. I don't worry about the pinky right away, and so I'll say, hey, go home and practice this. And they'll play down until they can get to the low G. Just slur down. And I don't even tell them what the letter is or whatever. Just put all your fingers down. And when you can get that sound really big, make it big. Then the next, a couple weeks later, I'll go, okay, now let's do this. And then I'll flick the register key for them. Okay, now you go home and practice that. Okay, now go home and practice this. And whatever. So we actually just got to that part of the book where they're actually reading the notes that they've been playing, and they're all playing over the break. They're not crossing the break. We're not figuring that. But now that they're getting, those first, I think they've gotten C, D, E, and F. I'll tell them, okay, now here's the next step. I want you to roll your fingers up. Play the low F, pop it to a C. Now just roll your fingers up. Don't worry about what letter you're playing. Just roll it up and then, get it in tune. And so we're making sure that there's enough mouthpiece and they're pulling up on the right thumb to get it all. And then when we get to that part of the book where they're playing those notes, they can already play them. It's just a matter of translating it to the written page.
One of the things that's a great resource for this, and I kind of ask this because it's on my mind, is if you listen to John Dennis has a podcast. Oh boy, John, what's your podcast? It's a beginning band podcast, and he's a music education professor at Texas State. But he had Darcy Williams from the After Sectionals podcast on.
Okay, yeah.
He did like a 4-part series where they just talked about supplemental materials.
Right.
And so what kind of exercises do you have for each group and each instrument? And it's really fascinating. And so, when you talk about those exercises, that's exactly what that is.
Right. And it changes from year to year as to who's going to need which exercise. And things like doing lip slurs and expanding the brass range up into my trumpets. My beginning trumpets now are starting to get to the upper part of the staff. But you have to kind of do those exercises without them seeing what they're doing first. Because if they see it's a high note, they freak out. If you just have them do lip slurs or, play this, repeat after me, they're playing in that register without realizing they're playing in that register. And one of the things, this is really funny, my students aren't allowed to say that something is hard. They're only allowed to say that it's new. And they're not allowed to say that they don't know something. They're only allowed to say that they don't know it yet. So we handed out one of the pieces for our May concert, I think on Monday. There were like 5 kids that all said, oh, this is really new. But, and that's, one of the other things going back to the method book versus teaching from concert music, to me, teaching skills from the method book and then picking music that reinforces what they know is the easiest progression. Because you can get through, you can read through a piece and get the basic gist of it and then refine it and then start working on musicality. But if you're having to really kind of hammer out rhythms and remind fingerings and accidentals and things like that, I don't think they're ready to play that piece. And the frustration level builds so much that it just does not become an enjoyable experience for anybody.
Well, this is my segue into the discussion that the fact that you're one of the original 7 for the Band Directors Facebook group.
I am a member of the BD7, as we like to call ourselves.
So we have our
own separate little group. So
you and I have had a conversation about this, and you guys are over 26,000 strong now. And as John Mackey said, he's being ghosted because he can't get in. It's a select group.
It's a pretty tight group.
So tell me about the founding of that again, if you don't mind telling the listeners.
Yeah, so Brian Wiss founded this group, and he started with a page called "I'm a Band Director," and there were quite a few people on that. And he wanted to migrate it to a different format, because Facebook has done a lot of work with their groups. They're finding that professional learning groups online and some of those focus groups are really using the platform really, really well. So he wanted to move it to a different site called Band Directors, where it is now, which was more closed, membership approval and just some more quality control features. So he contacted me in a Facebook message, I think, it had to have been, and said, I really like what you post. I like how you post. I like how you encourage young directors, things like that. Would you mind helping steer the members to this new site? And I was like, no, I'd happy to do that. And then he asked me if I wanted to help moderate the group, which means looking for people who are behaving themselves and also doing some of the member approvals and going through all of the people waiting for approval. Right now we have like 1,900 people in the queue waiting to be added. And we looked through every single one of those to verify that they're either a current director. If they're a retired director, we want to kind of know, how long did you teach? Because some people might say they taught 2 years and then retired. And I'm not saying that you don't have a lot of things to say, but you have to kind of gauge what people are adding to the group. There's been a lot of discussion about music ed majors being in there because we want them to learn from the discussion, but they're not allowed to post because you haven't been in the trenches yet. So a lot of what you're learning is theory. You haven't applied it. But then the other question is, if you add them as an undergrad, and then they end up not graduating in a music ed degree, or if they graduate and never take a teaching gig, do you go back and delete them from the group? So there's some gray area in there where we want to put people in that group and we want to have them there and learning from the experience, but we want to make sure that everybody's behaving and that everybody belongs there.
Yeah, I joked with you, and we talked about John joking about it. Before this, I was a college theory professor for 15 years. And so I started to write band music a few years ago, and I first saw the group, and I couldn't get in, and I was kind of like, oh, that's interesting. And then it was only when I took this job last spring that I was able to get into the group.
Right, because one of the things that the group is very, very strict about is you cannot self-promote. So we were finding a lot of people, composers, instructors, drill writers, those kinds of things that wanted to get in to promote themselves. And so our philosophy on that is, if you're really, really good at what you do and you're working for other band directors, let them promote you.
Right, exactly right.
So yeah, anyway. But it's an interesting group. So
It is. I'm always very careful because, sometimes I want to answer a question and I have to put my composer hat on because I can answer it from that way. But I'm always like, I want to be careful about how I answer this and, when I do contribute in that way, because, that is a part of who I am, or the theory part, for example,
Right. And we were talking earlier about there's such a variety of characters in there with different levels of experience, and sometimes people joke that some of the questions that get posted are a little, here, let me Google that for you. Really, you're asking that question here right now and letting people know that you don't know this knowledge. But I always have that attitude of, you know what? If they don't know that knowledge, then we need to make sure that they get it, because at the end of the day, they're still going back to their classrooms and teaching their students. And, we've got to help them and encourage them to get better. So it's an interesting dynamic. And entertaining at times. So I'm just gonna leave it at that.
Yeah. Well, you and I said there's it can be maddening and enlightening all on the same page.
Right. But I do love hearing everyone else's, experiences, and I think one of my favorite things is, if you've got. Like, I think I posted a couple months ago because my school is going to rotate. They're going to go we have a 9-period school day with 40 minutes each, and lunch is a period. And we're going to go to an 8-period rotating block with a lunch period in there. I've been 30 years of, teaching one way, and now I got to figure out this new thing. So I love getting the perspective of other people. And there are times that people post things, I'm like, wow, I'd never thought of that.
Right.
That's a really good idea.
There's a tremendous amount of ideas I've gotten. I mean, like I said, this is, my first year back after 15 years since I taught high school band. And boy, there was so much I had forgotten. That 2-3 months beforehand, it was just like every day, what can I suck out of this group or out of this book or out of this person today?
Yeah.
So it's a good resource for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
I sort of buried the lead. You mentioned that you're the president of the Florida Bandmasters Association, and you were also on staff at the American Band College. But I didn't ask you about your program, other than just sort of numbers and times. What sort of sets you apart? What got you noticed for these things, Cathi?
I honestly don't know. I don't know. I'm entertaining at meetings, I guess. Well, for the American Band College connection, so I graduated from the program. Everyone that's on graduate staff at ABC is a graduate of the program. And that program is just amazing. And I graduated in 99. And then in 2000, the summer of 2000, I really didn't have anything to do. So I was like, well, let me go back and hang out there for a little bit, because Dale Clevenger was the French horn clinician that summer. And I was like, well, that might be kind of interesting as a horn player to hear what Dale Clevenger has to say. And so I went out and just started kind of helping out with some of the clerical tasks and, helping the staff. The program was starting to expand, and it was really almost at a tipping point in terms of the staff being able to comfortably manage everything. And so I just kind of said, hey, well, I can help with attendance at the end of clinics, or I can help with, setup, or I can work in the research library a couple nights a week. I don't mind. I'm doing my own research anyway, so let me help out. And Max McKee looked at me and said, would you like to be on staff full time next year? And I said, I would love to. And so this summer would have been my 20th year on staff.
But you're not there.
Unfortunately, I'm not there because I was elected president-elect of the Florida Bandmasters Association in 2015, and I am now serving my first of 2 years as president of the FBA, and then I have 2 years as past president. And our summer conference for FBA got moved smack in the middle of the ABC experience, and so I've had to step down from ABC. And there's a lot of tears and gnashing of teeth, and because that experience changed me as a person, changed me as a director. I've had the opportunity to meet the best and the best and the best of the business. It's funny, I'll go to Midwest or something like that, and I'll be sitting with people and they'll just say, everybody, which isn't true. Not at all. I don't know everybody, but I do know a lot of people. And I've developed friendships and relationships with them beyond just face recognition. A lot of my friends, if you follow me on Facebook, know that Colonel Gabriel and I are sweethearts. He comes and conducts the Greater Miami Symphonic Band, which I play in every year. And my first experience with Gabe was in 97 when I was graduating from ABC. I prepped the band for his arrival. And we went to Normandy in 5 years ago for the 70th anniversary of the D-Day invasion, and he conducted a concert on Omaha Beach, and I played in the band, and we went to the ceremony, and we're going back in 2 months for the 75th. And so I consider him a dear friend and a mentor, and just I could not have done that without seeing him at ABC, meeting him at ABC, and then he's been back a few times. It's just been a great experience. I got to meet, we were just talking about Sam Palafian, and we're all in deep, deep mourning because Sam's gone now. I met Sam and I met Pat Sheridan, out there. I've met, the Boston Brass is out there often, and they also come to WIBIC, the Western International Band Clinic, of which I've also been a member of. And one of the things you asked, what sets my program apart, all those guys have been in my band room at one point or time. In fact, in 2008, the American Bandmasters Association conference was in Miami. Gary Green was hosting at the University of Miami, and I told Gary, I said, I want to be on your planning committee. He said, you do? And I said, yes. And he said, why? Because he knew it was going to be a lot of work. And I said, mostly because Max McKee and his wife Nell were going to be at that conference, and I want to make sure it was good for them. I just wanted to have them have a wonderful experience. But during ABA, the Boston Brass came down, because Jeff Bianchi was president of ABA, and Andrew Hitz, I think, was living in his basement at the time. And so he wanted Boston Brass, but I wanted Sam Palafian and Pat together doing their Dos Amigos project, which they had done at my school. They'd come down and done a breathing gym workshop, and then that night they did a concert, and it was 2 tubas and improvised Latin percussion. Like, it was amazing. And so I wanted that experience because of the Latin percussion in Miami, blah, blah, blah. So we ended up getting both groups to come down. And at one point on the stage at my school, Pat and Sam opened the concert, Boston Brass ended the concert, and then they did a combined number of Malagueña. It was amazing. 3 of the most amazing tuba players on the same stage at the same time. I posted about Sam on Friday or Saturday a couple years ago. He was teaching at the University of Miami and lived 5 blocks from me. And I had some tuba players that came to me and said, we think we want to switch to trombone. And I said, all right, well, let's think about that. And then I picked up the phone literally and called Sam and said, hey, I have these kids that switch. I need you to play at our spring concert. I need you to solo at our spring concert. This was like a month before. And he's like, all right, you tell me when to be there and I'll be there. And so we put all the little tuba players up in front, put him smack in the middle. We played a little piece called Heavy Metal, and opened up the middle so he could blow a little bit. And then he did an unaccompanied piece for the kids, and nobody switched. Everybody stuck with tuba. And the best part was that the dress rehearsal, I said, okay, we're going to do the dress rehearsal. You can come when you can, and we'll fit you in however it works for you. He goes, okay, that's great, but JD Shaw's in town. Can I bring him too? And I said, let me think. Yeah, that'll work. So then the 2 of them played for the kids, and it was really, and that concert, I think I posted, that was the concert where we premiered Haunted Clocks by Brian Balmages. That same concert. So yeah, that was a really good year. That was a really good year. So I have a lot of connections, and I am able to bring those connections to my school, but I also bring them to the community. Every time when Boston Brass comes to town, Jeff Connor will call me and say, hey, we're coming down. We want to do a workshop where your school will be willing to host. Because he knows I have the funds to kind of help. And then the other schools will contribute as possible. But my school will always, open up the auditorium and let us do it. Now, last year, this is a great story. Last year, 2017, Boston Brass was the keynote speaker for keynote group for the Florida Bandmasters Association Summer Conference. And so there was a session where all 5 guys are talking about their high school band experience. And Sam Palafian actually grew up in Miami and graduated from Coral Gables High School and played in Bill Ledoux's band, who is a legend in the field. And about a month later, I'm at a meeting for the opening of school for our school community, and we had a community activist from the neighborhood where our school is located, which has a large Bahamian settlement, an African-American community. It's a big, wealthy school, and then there's people around us that have less means. But this community activist was talking about all these people that have come out of the West Grove that have really, really done well, and he mentioned the name Winston Scott. Well, Sam had talked about Winston Scott being at Gables when Gables integrated with Carver High School. So Winston was at the black high school and Sam was at the white high school, and they got together. And Sam talked about how he heard Winston play jazz trumpet, and it completely changed Sam's perception of music and all that kind of stuff. So when Jeff Connor called me and said, Boston Brass is coming to Miami, but Coral Gables High School wants to host it this year, I had this just brilliant, I thought, idea. I said, let's get Winston to come down and play with Sam on the stage, because Winston still plays jazz trumpet. Winston ended up being an astronaut on space shuttle missions. He's done spacewalks, and he tells the story of like standing on the wing of the space shuttle and pulling in a $10 million payload that kind of got off kilter. So So I said, well, let's do this. Let's get these guys together. Winston can sit in with Boston Brass. Sam can see his old classmate. It'll be all home. And so we did that last year. But unfortunately, Sam got sick and couldn't make the trip. But this was kind of my whole attitude. I have these connections to put these pieces together, but I want to make sure that everybody in the community has the opportunity to participate. So it wasn't just my school. It wasn't just Gables High School. We had a couple different high schools that were there, to see that whole thing come together.
So, Cathi, a little bit earlier in the interview, you mentioned that I don't know how this happens, but as I listen to you talk, you're doing exceptional things with your program, and you have an exceptional network of people that you're drawing on. And so can you talk about this sort of imposter syndrome idea, but yet how you're also creating this network, because they're sort of at odds?
Yeah, it's the imposter syndrome is really, really, really real. I have no idea how I got where I am or how I have the connections that I have. It might be better to ask some of these people that are willing to work with me. Why do these guys call me and say, hey, we want to come work at your school? Or why, when I call, certain composers or certain clinicians and say, hey, can you do this? And they say, yeah, absolutely, no problem. I'm not really sure why they trust me so much, or how we've developed those relationships. I think part of it is that, being at ABC and being at WIBIC, it's not a chance meeting, and it's not a short meeting. We build very intense friendships and experiences. And I think part of it too is we make music together. When you go to Midwest and you see people, you shake their hand, you say hello, you meet them, whatever. But when you're participating in the music making experience, it's a different level. One of the things last summer, we had Alan McMurray for the FBA summer conference. And he, unfortunately we've had some tragedy in Florida, and at Parkland, and he had us read through the American Elegy by Kelly, and he talked about how that piece came to be and how he called Frank and rehearsed us on it. We never performed it in a concert because we just do a reading band, but at the end of that rehearsal, the emotion was palpable. There were people in tears. It was just a very raw, open experience. And I told everyone, I said, this is why we teach music and not math or science or whatever. We need to make sure that we always get back to that, because we get very caught up in the technical, how do we play a B flat? How do we get the kids across the break? How do we manage our schedules? We have to make time for us as musicians to get to that emotional part of why we do what we do. And I think that when we have those experiences, we make more connections with some of these composer, conductor, clinician types of people. And that's one of the things that I've been able to do over the years, is have seriously emotional experiences that we can then go back to. It's one thing to say, hey, do you remember that time you and I were sitting at Kitty O'Shea's over a beer and talked about this? Versus, do you remember that time, Colonel Gabriel, when we sat on Omaha Beach, right where you landed as a 19-year-old, and you played Hymn to the Fallen, and you looked out at the water and remembered back 70 years ago when you stormed that beach? It's a different connection. And I think that's where I've been able to get a little bit higher level connection with some of these people. Because it's always about music making, personally.
All right, Cathi, let's talk about the common questions I ask in each interview here at the end. And the first of these is, where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
For me, a lot of people say that competition is a motivator, and it can be. To me, in-house competition, within your own program is good because you have more control over the variables. If you want to have who can, play rhythms 1 through 100 with no mistakes, first, and you do that kind of thing and give the kids a nerd rope or whatever, because we're very much into sugar incentives at my school. Well, in my band room anyway. Those kids will do anything for sugar, anything for food. But I think if you do in-house competitions where you can control all the variables, it can be a really good motivator, but you have to be very careful. The crossing the line between extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation is a very fine line. Just like, the Suzuki method of teaching goes from the kids playing first and then learning the notation. If you don't time it just right to get them from the no music to reading music part, it can really become a problem. And so I think some of those competitions as motivators can be putting the cart before the horse. Dr. Tim always tells a story about positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement as motivators. And he'll say that fear will motivate kids faster than encouragement because they will run over each other to get to the finish line. The problem is once they cross the finish line, they abandon ship because they don't want anything to do with you after that. So it's a very careful thing. I know I have a lot of friends that do external competitions, and it's a really some of the programs are really out of balance in terms of this ensemble competes a lot and this ensemble gets a lot of financial support, and then this part of the program and the kids aren't getting as much support on the other side of it. I also think that some of those external competitions really highlight the inequity in resources that schools have. And that's, we didn't talk about this, but I actually, for my 50th birthday, which was last July, launched a nonprofit called Music Mentor Network. And part of our mission basically is to provide resources to put private lesson teachers and live accompanists and guest artists and guest teachers, kind of like what my kids automatically get because they're in a very privileged school, to put those same resources into schools that are underserved, to kind of balance the playing field a little bit, level it out, because the story behind the impetus behind that organization was I have a student that is graduating from the University of Miami on a full ride scholarship on oboe. Because his parents invested thousands and thousands of dollars in his private lessons and summer camps and things like that when he was in middle school through high school. So now he had a full ride scholarship to the University of Miami, and now he's going to go on to another full ride scholarship for his master's, and very deserving. He's worked his butt off. He's an amazing musician. But right around the same time when he auditioned and got into that school, I was judging a solo and ensemble for a school that, I had a French horn kid playing a solo. He didn't have an original copy of the music. He didn't have a live accompanist. He was playing on his cell phone. Somebody texted him in the middle of the performance, so the cell phone cut out. When the music came back on, he jumped exactly to where that accompaniment was. So you knew he'd worked his butt off. And I got angry. It angered me so much that the resources in these two schools were so different, and it happens way more than it should. So my goal is to try to combat that and make it, because the thing is, the kids that don't have the resources in high school are the ones that need those scholarships to college just to get them in the door, so that's kind of my mission, to fix that.
So this question is, I've been thinking a lot about this one recently, and this one was first brought up by Mary Land, and she asked me to ask this of her, and I get a lot of different answers, and I'm not sure I'm asking it the right way anymore. I'm sort of doubting myself. And so let me ask you, how do you find work-life balance in a career as a music teacher? But let me add this. Is it possible even to find that balance?
I think that it is, but it looks different for each person. And that's, I think, where we get into that comparison game, and we become unhappy with what we have because we see what somebody else has. But then when we get what somebody else has, we realize we don't want it that much. I love social media. My friends will tell you I'm quite entertaining on social media. Every time I think, man, I need to just cut this out because it's just a time suck sometimes. And then people are like, no, you can't leave. We love reading your stories. When you're on social media, you see other people, other directors who maybe are getting accolades that you wish you had, or having huge programs, or, there's the fear of missing out. There's the jealousy. It happens. It happens to all of us. And we start comparing ourselves to everyone else. And I have to remind myself that I am enough. What I'm doing is enough for where I am right now. For me, the work-life balance comes from, I do my work at work and I play at home, and I'm really, really blessed to be in a school that allows me the time and resources to do my job well, and to do it during the school day for the most part. I do bring work home sometimes. I've got some budget proposals to work on tonight, things like that. What's really worked for me is expanding my network to people who don't do what I do. I have fantastic faculty members at my school. They're some of my best friends. I have two guys that I hang out with during free periods. They're my boos. We have Boo Corner, where we sit and we just, drink coffee and chat about our lives and stuff. And they both teach English, and I teach band. So I don't understand what they do and they don't understand what I do, but we just enjoy seeing each other. I was really lucky that last semester our school offered scuba diving classes. And so a bunch of the teachers said, we're going. And it's really helped me put things in perspective, that I sometimes do too much, and I see what they're doing and they're happy with their lives and their balance is better. And so staying away from the band room sometimes, and staying away from the band world sometimes, and seeing how other people live that work-life balance can help us a bit.
All right, Cathi, what are the challenges facing music education and band, and how can we best meet them?
I think challenges in teaching in general, not just band. We're being asked to do more and more with less and less. The parenting styles have changed. The student engagement in the classroom has changed. In 30 years, it's really, really different from where I started. But I think in terms of music education in general, we've always been pretty siloed, where, I teach band and you teach orchestra and you teach choir, and sometimes I'll do two disciplines and sometimes you'll do two disciplines and things like that. But I don't think we're always reaching as many students in the school as we should or as we could. But we don't necessarily have the skills to do anything else. You might have a lot of kids that would love to learn guitar, but there's no time in your schedule to teach guitar or learn the skills to teach guitar, or a steel drum band, or a mariachi group, or a salsa band, or whatever. Our goal as music educators should be to reach as many students as possible. And for a long time, we could do that with our traditional ensembles. That's not the case anymore. They have so many other things that they could be doing with their time that if we don't meet them where they want to be and get them started on a journey that speaks to them, then we lose them entirely. And you might have a guitar class where a kid is really inspired to join the band and or join the orchestra or something like that. But I think we have to be very, very careful that we don't try to reach every kid.
All right, Cathi, I hand you a time machine and say it has one destination, your high school graduation. What do you tell yourself? What advice do you give yourself?
I think my advice would be to slow down. I remember being so anxious to just get through college and get into the classroom and take over the world. And sometimes I think you need to stop and slow down and enjoy the ride. And you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to. When I first started teaching, I was teaching inner city when I first started, and really almost to the point of burnout. And I think learning how to slow down and appreciate what I had would have been helpful.
Yeah, no, it's hard when you're young. Like you said, you want to take over the world,
I think one of the things, the whole talk less, smile more. I think one of the things that I did do well when I first started teaching, and those who've been teaching with me for 30 years might disagree, is one of the advantages I had is I moved to Florida where nobody knew me. I had no history, whatever, but I didn't know anybody either. And so I was able to sit back and listen, because I didn't know anything and I didn't know anybody. So I really couldn't brag about anything. So I had to just sit back and listen to other people talk. And I learned very quickly that if you talk about things of which you do not know, people will not trust you. And sometimes they'll talk about you. So I learned to just kind of keep my mouth shut sometimes when necessary and observe.
If you had a choice, what would be the final work that you would engage with? It could be for orchestra, band, choir, whatever musical work.
That's the question I've been thinking about quite a bit. And every time I listen to one of your podcasts, I hear that question and I start thinking. It's so hard, but I think I'm going to have to go with Alfred Reed's Russian Christmas music. I knew Alfred from the American Band College. I knew Alfred lived a few blocks from the University of Miami and conducted the Greater Miami Symphonic Band once a year and conducted Russian Christmas every year with us, almost every year with us. My interesting Alfred Reed story was he was a keynote speaker for our summer conference years ago, and in Ocala, northern part of Florida, and somebody needed to drive him back to Miami, which was like 5 hours. And I remember Gary Green kind of lamenting because he didn't have a way to get Alfred back home. And I kind of jumped into the conversation. I said, I'll take him home. And Gary looked at me and he said, "You will?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Why?" Gary always seems to ask me that question, like, what's your motivation? And I said, there are people in this world that would cut off their right arm to be in a car with Alfred Reed for 5 hours. I'd be honored to drive him home. And Alfred was, to know him, we'll chuckle and stuff. He loved to talk, especially about his favorites, Alfred Reed. So it was a ride home, and I enjoyed it and all that kind of stuff. But the best part was I get to his house and drop him off, and I go in and see Margie, his wife, and he takes me into the office, and you see all the plaques on the wall of all his honors and things that he's done, and there's the desk where he writes, and then you see photography around the house. McKee, he was working with Alfred Reed at music camp in Saskatchewan. Alfred taught him photography. And so I asked Al, I said, "Now, do you develop all your own film?" And he said, "Yes, I do. And would you like to see my dark room?" So So I said, sure. So I go in and Alfred goes, he shuts the door and turns off lights. And I'm thinking, wow, I'm in a dark room with Alfred Reed. This is really kind of interesting and kind of awkward all at the same time. But I think the reason that I would pick Russian Christmas was the last time Alfred conducted that piece with the Greater Miami Symphonic Band, just before he passed away. Gary Green was sitting next to me in the horn section, just observing the rehearsal and doing well. And Gary looked at me and said, oh, this is going to be bad. This isn't work. We're never going to make this. And, we were both kind of worried because he just wasn't mentally there. And Alfred with his red and black houndstooth jacket, as he always wore, and that performance was absolutely magical. Like beyond magical. And Gary tells this story a lot. And when he's conducting the Greater Miami Symphonic Band and he tells the story, he looks right at me. He's like, you remember because you were there. But that piece continues to just inspire me. It's such an amazing piece of music. And he's a composer that I remember playing. I remember playing Alleluia, L'Adomus Dei when I was in high school. And when I was in high school, that was the piece I think that grabbed me the most, which was Alfred Reed also. But I think I have a better connection emotionally with Russian Christmas.
Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share or promote?
Well, just watch the Music Mentor Network. We're just starting off and trying to, bring experiences to kids and in programs that wouldn't normally be able to have those opportunities. So just keep an eye on it. We're moving slowly because it's really hard to manage a full-time job. I'm also working on a second master's in nonprofit management. And, that plus president of the FBA is taking up a little bit of my time. Mm-hmm. I'm a little busy.
Sure.
Can we go back to that work-life balance thing again? Work-life balance. So also, if anyone's interested in attending the Florida Bandmasters Conference, it is in June. It's at the Daytona Beach Hilton, which it's an amazing hotel. It's right on the water, and it's just awesome. And we're having Alfred Watkins as our keynote speaker. And we have, some clinics and a lot of different things. It's the 25th and 26th of June. And you can go to the Florida Bandmasters Association webpage if you want more information. It's for the Florida Association, but if anybody wants to come to Miami and play their instrument and hang out at the beach, we would be happy to have you.
How can people get in touch with you?
The best place to get in touch with me is probably Facebook, because I'm there a lot and I do a lot of tagging of people. If people ask me questions, for instance, on the ABC Experience, we have a page for current and past students. Somebody posted a question about a score analysis of David Holdinger's, I think it was Prairie Dances. I could be wrong on the title. Anybody ever done this? Can you contact me? I have a question about the score. And I said, well, why don't you just ask David yourself? And then invited David into the group and tagged him so that he could, address, just go to the source. So I'm really good at sharing information and tagging people. So that's probably the best way. Plus, it's really entertaining. The other thing that I decided to do for my 50th birthday is visit all 50 state capitals. So if anybody wants to meet me at a state capital, just follow me and I'll tell you where I'm going to be. I've done 19 in a year. And I'm going to do, I think 14. Yeah, I think I'm going to do 14 more this summer. So.
Awesome. All right, Cathi, this was great. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely.